The 13-year-old girl took off her glasses and looked straight into the woman's eyes. Unexpectedly, she could read everything the woman was thinking. She even knew that this woman was a scammer. It turned out that since birth she had possessed a special ability. She could read other people's thoughts just by looking into their eyes. The girl's name was Ine. She was the third generation of the Bok family. All members of the family possessed extraordinary powers. For example, Ine's grandmother could predict the future through sleep, and Ine's aunt Dong-hee had the ability to fly in the sky. Especially Ine's father was Guiju. He could travel back in time, but at present they could not use those powers because the grandmother suffered from severe insomnia, and Dong-hee could not fly because she was too fat. Guiju also could not return to the past because he was depressed after losing his wife 7 years ago. That day, the whole family went to a cliff on the sea to try his superpowers again, but the results were unsuccessful. Man-hoim had a huge headache because of the family situation now. If this continued, those powers would most likely disappear forever. Suddenly, Guiju fell into the sea. Luckily, a brave girl jumped in to save him. After both of them successfully got to shore, Guiju mistook the girl for his deceased ex-wife. He immediately hugged the girl and fainted. The whole family took him to the hospital for a checkup. Luckily, he was fine. A few days later, Mrs. S. Man-hoim went for a massage to treat her insomnia. Not only that, she also offered a prize of 1,000 won to anyone who could make her sleep. Even though she had insomnia, she refused to take sleeping pills because she was afraid of side effects and drug resistance. No one in the shop would accept because she was too difficult. Only one new employee named Da-hae accepted the challenge. Everyone was happy and agreed to let Da-hae do this task. Before starting the massage, Da-hae offered Mrs. Man-hoim a cup of herbal tea. She shared that this tea is very good for improving sleep. Mrs. Man-hoim trusted her and drank a cup of tea. Then Da-hae started the massage treatment. Mrs. Man-hoim felt a clear difference compared to the other staff here. Thanks to Da-hae's skillful hands and professional techniques, Mrs. Man-hoim gradually fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, Mrs. Man-hoim felt extremely surprised and satisfied with Da-hae's service. She decided to give Da-hae 1,000 won as promised. When Mrs. Man-hoim looked closely at Da-hae's face, she suddenly realized that Da-hae was the one who saved her son a few days ago. When Guiju fell into the sea, Mrs. Man-hoim was overjoyed and quickly gave Da-hae more money with deep gratitude, but Da-hae refused and said that she had not slept comfortably here. Seeing that, Mrs. Man-hoim had the idea of inviting Da-hae to her house to continue the massage treatment. Da-hae looked at the massage parlor owner. Mrs. Man-hoim understood and immediately gave the owner a tip. The massage parlor owner immediately agreed to let Da-hae have an additional massage service at home. Da-hae promised to come to her house tomorrow. Mrs. Man-hoim was extremely satisfied with Da-hae's skills. The next day, Da-hae went to Man-hoim's house. Da-hae was surprised by the luxury of the house. Man-hoim invited Da-hae to her garden to finish the massage. At the same time, Guiju's room was filled with empty wine bottles. Since he had been depressed, he had been drunk almost every day. Since he ran out of wine, he went to the kitchen to get another bottle. While he was opening the bottle, he saw Da-hae coming down to make herbal tea. She offered to help him, but he didn't care. When he walked past Da-hae, she intentionally spilled the wine bottle and looked worried about him. She helped him pick up the pieces. Just then, Mrs. Man-hoim walked in and saw this scene. She thought that Da-hae had saved her son twice, so she was very grateful. Guiju's attitude was still very cold, even though he knew that Da-hae was the one who saved him. This made Mrs. Man-hoim extremely ashamed of her son and pulled him out. Da-hae waited until she was alone in the kitchen and quickly mixed some medicine into the herbal tea. After making sure that the medicine had completely dissolved, she brought the tea to Mrs. Man-hoim. Then she started massaging Mrs. Man-hoim. Meanwhile, Da-hae told that her parents had passed away and that she had been married twice. Her first husband was an adulterer and her second husband was abusive. However, she still dreamed of a happy family. Mrs. Man-hoim felt sympathy and realized that her son shared the same pain as Da-hae. Mrs. Man-hoim said that Guiju got married early, but unfortunately his wife passed away. He still couldn't forget his wife and became depressed. When Da-hae left, Mrs. Man-hoim was very pleased and then praised Da-hae to her husband. Before she could finish speaking, she fell asleep without realizing it. In her dream, she saw Da-hae wearing the Bok family heirloom ring. When she woke up, she told her husband about it, so she guessed that Da-hae was destined for Guiju. Perhaps thanks to Da-hae, Guiju was able to escape his depression and recover his superpowers. So Mrs. Man-hoim told her husband to immediately schedule an appointment for Da-hae to come to her house. On the other side, Da-hae went home to take a bath, which was her house. It turns out that her family is not dead. Her mother works as a back scrubber at a sauna. Although she is a scammer, Da-hae also has a weakness. She's afraid of fire. Cooking a pack of noodles is also a challenge for her. In the end, because she was so scared, she ate the noodles raw. Guiju's family owns a building worth 50 billion, in which Guiju owns a gym in that building. That day, a beautiful girl with a sexy body named Grace came to apply to be a trainer there. Guiju hired her without reading her application. When Grace was just exclaiming that it was so easy to apply for a job, Dong-hee, Guiju's older sister, stopped her and checked her application. After carefully examining it and realizing that Grace had a home fitness channel on YouTube and nearly 300,000 subscribers, Dong-hee immediately agreed. Then Guiju came down and gave his sister some money to buy a birthday present present for his daughter. Dong-hee was consulting a client about liposuction, but because of her overweight appearance, the client felt insecure. Her pants button accidentally hit the customer's face, causing the customer to angrily leave. The director of this private hospital, who was also Dong-hee's lover, saw that scene and felt helpless. He immediately told Dong-hee that she no longer needed counsel. She looked back at her poster at the clinic when she had not gained weight and felt sad. Then Dong-hee bought some cake to eat. Even though she had not paid yet, she had eaten a lot. But when she swiped her card, all the cards exceeded the limit. She had to use the money Guiju asked her to buy a gift for his daughter to pay. Suddenly, she received a call from her mother, informing her that Dahae would come to their house to attend in a birthday on Saturday. On Saturday, when Guiju saw his parents preparing food, he wondered why his daughter had never had a birthday party before. Why did she suddenly have one this time? At this time, Dong-hee appeared and said that she would come too. Guiju looked at his sister and realized that she had spent all the money he gave her. Meanwhile, his mother tried to match him with Dahae. Guiju felt tired and disappointed. Dahae arrived and was happily welcomed by Man-home and her husband. During mealtime, Man-home openly stated her intention to have Dahae marry Guiju. Guiju and his sister immediately threatened Dahae that their family was very scary. Guiju's daughter was at the age of being naughty, so she would definitely suffer if she married him. Guiju's mother pulled him into the house. Mr. Soongu called In-ae down to the party. At that time, only Dahae and Dong-hee were left. Dong-hee said that she was on a diet, but in fact she was craving lobster, so she asked Dahae to get her a glass of water. After Dahae left, Dong-hee began to eat comfortably. Mr. Soongu called his niece down to celebrate her birthday and eat delicious food. In-ae expressed that she only wanted to eat seaweed soup that he cooked. Of course, Mr. Soongu agreed to this simple request from his beloved niece. He went to the kitchen to cook seaweed soup and light candles on a cake for In-ae. At the same time, Guiju questioned his mother about why she invited another woman home on In-ae's birthday. She replied that she wanted him to forget his ex-wife and live happily again. She did not forget to scold Guiju for previously discouraging the two from falling in love because she did not see a future for them, but Guiju disobeyed her and insisted on getting married. This was heard by Dahae, who was getting water. Suddenly, In-ae came down from upstairs and witnessed the whole thing. She came down to blow out the candles on her cake and went upstairs. Seeing his daughter's attitude, Guiju angrily left. At this time, it suddenly started raining outside. Mr. Soongu and Mrs. Man-home ran out to bring in food. Suddenly, Mrs. Man-home felt dizzy and fainted. Mr. Soongu and Dong-hee rushed her to the hospital. Mr. Soongu asked Dahae to run in and turn off the gas stove for the seaweed soup he was cooking, but he didn't know that Dahae was most afraid of fire. Dahae looked at the gas stove that was burning fiercely. She found a pair of tongs and mustered up all her courage to approach it. Luckily, In-ae went downstairs and turned off the stove. Dahae only had time to thank him. Suddenly, In-ae asked Dahae what she wanted to put in the soup, because In-ae had seen Dahae put medicine in Mrs. Man-home's tea. Dahae explained that it was licorice concentrate, but In-ae didn't listen and went upstairs. A while later, smelling the aroma of the seaweed soup, In-ae went downstairs again and saw that Dahae had prepared food for her. At first, the little girl refused to eat until Dahae ate first. Then In-ae felt at ease and realized that the food was delicious. Dahae also spoke well of Guiju, making In-ae feel more sympathetic towards her. Therefore, In-ae advised Dahae not to get involved with this family and revealed the secret that her family had superpowers. But now the family is suffering from modern diseases, so the superpowers have been lost. Dahae listened to everything. However, Dahae did not believe it and thought that In-ae had a rich imagination. On this side, Guiju went to buy a gift for In-ae and then visited his ex-wife's grave. There he met his ex-wife's parents there. His mother-in-law wondered why Guiju was also in an accident, but why he was not injured. Guiju could not explain. When he got home, Guiju found Dahae washing the dishes. Dahae shared that In-ae had just had dinner with her. Guiju was extremely surprised because as far as he knew, In-ae never ate dinner. Dahae also told her about the day she saved him at sea. She saw him step into the sea to save a little girl's stuffed rabbit, and he did everything. She praised him as a superhero for that action, and she said that in the past, someone sacrificed himself to save her, so she always cherished her own life to repay that person. Dahae's words moved Guiju, but he still tried to act cold. After asking Guiju to wash the dishes, Dahae said goodbye to him and left. Dahae returned to the sauna and was rewarded by her mother with a cup of rice water for her acting skills. Suddenly, Dahae's younger sister walked out. She was Grace. It turned out that Dahae's family lived on fraud. Before Dahae married her two ex-husbands, it was thanks to her and her family's perfect acting. Their whole family received a large sum of money from her two ex-husbands for mental damages as well as divorce benefits. What Dahae's family was aiming for was her ex-husband's property. This time the next victim is Guiju. Dahae tells the story of this family having special abilities. That's why the family got rich from stocks or lottery, and now their family has lost their special abilities due to the disease of the times. Dahae's family laughed at this. They thought it was absurd. The disease of the times was because Guiju's family was too happy and became sick. Guiju went into his daughter's room and wished her a happy birthday. He also gave In-ae a very cute stuffed rabbit. The little girl immediately put the stuffed rabbit her father gave her in the closet. There were countless stuffed rabbits in there. In-ae remembered the accident 7 years ago. Guiju also gave her a stuffed rabbit. Then Guiju returned to the past. Only mother and daughter were left in the car. Suddenly, In-A's eyes changed color, and then the car crashed into a ravine. When Guiju returned to the present, it was too late. When Guiju was 9 years old, he had won a lottery and won the Carp King prize. He was extremely happy to receive the award. When he got home, Guiju saw his mother watching the stock market on the newspaper. He sneaked into the house, but his mother found out because he had gone out. When he showed it to his mother, she broke the prize and beat Guiju with a whip. Suddenly, Guiju returned to the moment when he won the Carp King prize. The whole world was gray and colorless. Only Guiju had full color. It was the first time he used his ability to go back to the past when he remembered a happy moment. A few days later, Guiju returned to that moment again, but he realized that he could only see, not touch, everything in the past. Suddenly, Guiju was shocked when he saw the scene of the little dog and its owner. The dog ran to the intersection and had an accident, lying motionless on the side of the road. The little girl's sobbing made him feel even more heartbroken. Guiju realized that a moment of happiness for him could also be a moment of unhappiness for others. He tried to go back to the past to save the dog but failed, no matter what he did. After returning many times, Guiju did not feel happy at that moment. Partly because of returning many times, the rest was the feeling of guilt in his mind. Since then, Guiju has not been able to return to that moment. Returning to the present, Guiju looked at the pile of teddy bears In-A threw out. It seemed that his daughter no longer liked them. However, the truth was that In-A thought that because of her birth, many bad things happened to her family, so she felt that she did not deserve to receive a birthday present. That is why she threw all the teddy bears away. Before In-A went to school, Guiju observed that someone was following In-A. He told her to be careful when going to school. Guiju went to the mall to buy another gift for his daughter. Dae had followed him before and pretended to come there by chance. She offered to help him choose a gift, but Guiju refused. Dae tried to hold his hand, but Guiju pushed it away. Unfortunately, he tore her sleeve. He shyly left to drink beer nearby. A moment later, Dae appeared in front of Guiju with the shoes he had refused earlier. She begged on to bring the shoes back to In-A. Thinking of his daughter, Guiju reluctantly took the shoes and threw a wad of money on the table. He didn't want to owe Dae, then he left without paying any attention to Dae. While Dae was drinking beer in the mall, the fire alarm suddenly rang. Everyone ran away. Dae was extremely panicked. She couldn't move because she was so scared. She could only hold her head and sit down. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her hand. When Dae raised her head, she found out that it was Guiju. She was extremely surprised because she thought he had already gone home. Suddenly, the security guard announced that the fire alarm just now was just a system error. Dae turned her head towards the security guard, and when she turned back, Guiju had disappeared. She felt confused and did not understand why he suddenly appeared and helped her when she was panicking. At home, In-A received the shoes outside the door. The girl loved the gift. She smiled brightly and looked at herself in the mirror. Guiju saw his daughter happily receiving the shoes and felt happy inside. A few days later, Mrs. Manholm invited Dae to her family's gym and said that if Dae became her daughter-in-law, the whole building would belong to Dae. Although Dae really wanted to, she still restrained herself and replied that she was not someone who easily got married after going through 2 previous failed marriages. That tactfulness made Mrs. Manholm very pleased. Dong-hee was nearby and observed the whole thing. She pulled her mother aside and warned Dae that she might be a scammer. Grace, who was nearby, overheard and signaled Dae. Just then, Guiju arrived at the gym. Dae approached him to thank him for helping her in the fire and even holding her hand to comfort her. But he didn't understand what she said. Mrs. Manholm was very happy to hear that because she thought their relationship had improved. When Dae returned home, she wondered why Guiju didn't admit to holding her hand. It seemed like he had some secret. At school, In-A seemed to be an invisible girl. Few people paid attention to her. That made In-A feel lost and lonely. Currently, In-A hasn't joined any clubs, even though she really wants to integrate with her friends. However, her shyness and embarrassment prevent her from signing up for any activities. Because of that, the homeroom teacher called Guiju and told him to pay more attention to his daughter. The teacher also reminded Guiju to sign the information that the school sent to the parents. At this time, Guiju found the papers in her daughter's desk box and signed everything. After finishing signing, Guiju went downstairs to find some alcohol. Suddenly, Mr. Sungu appeared and invited him to go drink at the restaurant. There were his mother and Dae. Guiju was about to leave when Mr. Sungu pushed him in. A moment later, Guiju's father and mother left to create conditions for Guiju and Dae to be alone together. However, Guiju still acted cold towards Dae and continued to drink alone. At the cosmetic clinic, Dong-hee discovered that it was past time and her lover had not returned. The staff said that he was examining a customer. Dong-hee had to wait outside. She heard laughter in the clinic. Unable to bear the laughter, Dong-hee immediately went to check. She caught sight of her lover and Grace happily chatting. The two explained that they were just seeing a doctor, leaving Dong-hee speechless. She felt disappointed and jealous. Dong-hee invited her lover out for a drink and took the opportunity to suggest that they register their marriage so they could soon have a 50 billion building. The reason was that Mrs. Manholm had made a deal with her 2 children that whoever got married first would inherit the 50 billion house. However, her lover refused, saying that they would only consider getting getting married when they paid off the rent he borrowed from her. Dong-hee knew he was making an excuse to refuse. She still couldn't resist thinking that the reason was her overweight body. Dong-hee was determined to change herself by going back to the gym. She worked hard to lose weight. She believed that only when her body became slimmer would he come back to love her passionately. In another development, In-A was on her way home when she suddenly stopped. Someone was following her from behind. In ran as fast as she could to the nearest restroom and started calling each family member. But everyone was busy. Grandma was sleeping, Grandpa was busy cleaning, and Aunt Dong-hee was busy losing weight. In-A had no choice but to call her father, but the person who answered the phone was Da-hae. Da-hae woke up Gwiju to help In-A, even though he was currently drunk. But when Da-hae mentioned his daughter's name, Gwiju woke up and rushed out. When Gwiju ran to the public restroom, he saw a very suspicious man outside. The man was Da-hae's family member. He was here to follow In-A. Gwiju suspected that he was the one who scared In-A, so Gwiju immediately rushed to fight the man. The man wanted to fight back, but Da-hae signaled him not to touch Gwiju and to leave as soon as possible. Gwiju, drunk, punched the man's helmet. The man pretended to be seriously injured and ran away. At this time, In-A also came out of the bathroom. Gwiju comforted his daughter that he had dealt with the stalker and told her not to worry. But In-A did not understand what her father was saying. She whispered to Da-hae about her problem. It turned out that In-A ran to the bathroom and called for help because it was her first time on her period, not because there was a stalker. Da-hae helped In-A buy sanitary napkins and lent her a shirt to cover the bloodstains on her skirt. After successfully taking In-A home, Gwiju asked Da-hae out for a drink to thank her. Da-hae recalled the moment when the two held hands at the mall, but Gwiju still denied it. Da-hae guessed that maybe it was him in the future who held her hand, but Gwiju insisted that it was not true, because even if he could go back to the past, he would not be able to touch anything from the past, and he was currently depressed, so he could not go back to the past. Dong-hee was still running with increasing intensity. She really wanted to return to her slim body like before. Suddenly, while running, Dong-hee flew up for a moment and fell off the treadmill. Grace saw this and immediately came out to support Dong-hee. When Gwiju returned home, he remembered what Da-hae said when he held her hand. He tried to close his eyes, and sure enough, he had returned to the moment the fire alarm rang at the mall. The whole world was gray, only Gwiju had full color, and he was able to touch her. It turns out that Da-hae wasn't lying, he really held her hand. Gwiju returned to the present. His ability had returned. Not only that, he could also touch other people, so he tried to go back to the happy moments with his ex-wife, and wished he could touch her. Sure enough, he was able to go back, but it was the beach scene when Da-hae saved him. He tried again, this time going back to the moment Gwiju was with In-A and Da-hae in the public restroom. Every time he went back to the past, Da-hae was there. He was so surprised by this new discovery. Immediately after that, Gwiju went to her workplace to clearly question why Da-hae appeared in his mind during his happy moments. But the way he asked was like he was confessing his feelings. Mrs. Manholm saw this scene and immediately told Gwiju that Da-hae would be the important person to help the whole family regain their lost ability. After that, she suggested that Da-hae quit her job at the spa and move in with them. On the surface, she asked Da-hae to tutor and take care of In-A, but in reality, the purpose was to get Da-hae and Gwiju married. Then he saw her waiting at the fountain. Memories of his daughter's birthday flooded back. It turned out that the moment In-A was born, Gwiju's entire fire department had to deal with a fire at the high school. His captain passed away in that fire. Seeing the captain's wife and children crying at the funeral made Gwiju heartbroken, because that day, the captain took the initiative to take over Gwiju's shift so that he could go to the hospital with his daughter. Gwiju's happiest moment was also the moment when others were most miserable. During the captain's funeral, Gwiju suddenly flashed back to the moment his daughter was born. Not far away was that fire. Suddenly, Gwiju saw the yellow hospital door standing out in the gray scene. He reached out to touch it and succeeded. That was the first time he could touch something in the past. Without thinking much, Gwiju immediately ran to that high school fire. He saw with his own eyes the captain running into the fire. Then the building collapsed, and the captain lost his life. No matter how many times Gwiju tried to return to the past, he could not save the captain at that moment. Because of that, he was haunted and could not concentrate on his mission. In the end, his boss told him to go for psychological treatment. From then on, Gwiju quit his job as a firefighter. After that time, Gwiju sometimes unconsciously returned to the moment his daughter was born, but he could only helplessly watch everyone in the fire, which also caused a lot of trouble for his family, because sometimes he suddenly disappeared and suddenly appeared. On the day of the accident, Gwiju's ex-wife threatened that if he disappeared today, she would take In-A away from here. Before he could understand what she said, he had already returned to the past. But this time, Gwiju did not go to save anyone, but decided to return to the present with his wife, but it was too late. His wife drove the car down the cliff and passed away, while In-A was lucky to keep her life. Returning to the present, Gwiju sadly went home, leaving Da-hae waiting for him at the fountain, because he thought he would cause trouble for others. At night, Da-hae's family gathered. Da-hae's mother, Lee-hom, thought that the Bok family was not normal when they thought they had superpowers, so she wanted Da-hae to collect a lot of evidence to fight them in court. The next day, Gwiju was surprised to see Da-hae move into his house. She said that yesterday yesterday he went to the fountain and gave her this bouquet of flowers. Manhuim and her husband were there and were very happy to hear the news, but Guiju kept denying it and pulled Dahae out to ask about her lie. But Dahae insisted that not only did he give her flowers, he also hugged her there. Guiju thought that maybe it was his future self who did it, so he let it go. Dahae went in to eat with everyone. Time went back many years ago. On the catwalk, a girl was confidently walking. Everyone was staring at her. That was Donghee's past. She used to be very slim and had a sexy body. After the performance, she jumped from the rooftop and flew. While enjoying the happiness, her body suddenly started to gain weight. Donghee couldn't control her body and fell to the ground. It turned out that it was just a dream. The noise outside the door woke her up. At the same time, Donghee also received bad news that the apartment she was living in was about to be sold. Donghee immediately returned to her mother's house. At that time, Mrs. Manhome was getting a massage from Dahae. Dahae understood and left so that the mother and daughter could talk. Donghee discovered that her family's finances were currently in dire straits due to her mother's wrong investments. Dahae recorded everything outside and then went out to report to her family. When it was time for dinner, Dahae realized that the family refused to eat together. Ina cooked spicy noodles for herself, and when she took off her glasses, Dahae took her glasses. She tried to ask for her glasses back. Dahae told Ine to close her eyes and fixed her eyebrows. That made her prettier. Suddenly, their eyes met. Ine's eyes turned blue, and she could read Dahae's thoughts. It turned out that Ine's superpower was to read other people's thoughts if they looked at each other. She had hidden her ability from everyone, which was why Ine always wore glasses. She realized that Dahae was plotting to take over the building. The next day in class, Ine's glasses were snatched off by a classmate. Because of her severe nearsightedness, Ine couldn't see clearly. Suddenly, Ine's boyfriend picked up her glasses and returned them to her. At that moment, their eyes met. Ine's boyfriend complimented her on her beauty when he saw Ine's bare face. At the gym, Donghee called her boyfriend. She asked him to have dinner with her tonight, but he found a reason to reject her. Donghee immediately called her close friends to ask them to go out to dinner tonight. Grace heard about it. At night, when Donghee was about to leave with her close friends, she saw her boyfriend walking with Grace into the hotel. Donghee immediately ran upstairs to check and saw the two of them kissing passionately in front of the room. At that time, Donghee was shocked, but she just left without doing anything. In fact, Grace intentionally let Donghee see that scene because she wanted Donghee to break up with that bastard boyfriend. The next morning, when her boyfriend came home, Donghee took the initiative to suggest that the two of them stop seeing each other for a while. He said he was worried about Donghee, but he was happy to be free from her. That night, Dahae was cooking soup but accidentally let the fire catch on the paper next to the gas stove. She panicked and didn't know what to do until Guiju came to help her put out the fire. He realized she was afraid of fire. When Guiju took out the trash, he saw a flower shop outside. There was a bouquet of flowers that looked very similar to the one he gave Dahae. When Guiju picked it up, the owner said that the bouquet was only for sale today because it was almost out of season. Suddenly, he went back to the past with his hands holding that bouquet. The scene was still monochrome. Only Dahae was full of color. Guiju walked in front of her and was about to reject her. Suddenly, a car passed by, causing Guiju to pull Dahae into his arms to avoid the car. That made Dahae misunderstand that he had hugged her. Then she saw the bouquet of flowers Guiju was holding. Dahae thought Guiju brought her flowers, so she happily accepted the flowers, much to Guiju's surprise. At the same time, Mr. Soongu was dancing in the dance hall. This scene was captured by Dahae's accomplices. Meanwhile, Dahae was making tea and putting medicine in it like usual. Suddenly, Donghee returned and announced that she would be living here from now on and wanted to drink the tea Dahae was making. Dahae was startled and stopped Donghee from drinking. Donghee realized Jahee's unusual behavior and immediately asked Dahae if she had mixed anything into the tea. Dahae immediately drank the whole cup of tea and said that she wanted to make Donghee a cup of hot tea, so she stopped Donghee. Then Dahae washed the dishes and fell asleep under Donghee's supervision. Dahae told herself not to sleep. Suddenly, she saw Donghee go into the secret room to rummage through valuables. Dahae secretly followed, even though she was very sleepy, and recorded the scene, with the purpose of disqualifying Donghee as guardian. Suddenly, Dahae saw Donghee floating off the floor while trying to get something from above. Dahae couldn't believe her eyes. She looked again, and it was still the same scene. Dahae was so scared that she quickly ran outside, but accidentally made a noise that made Donghee turn back. Dahae ran to the stairs to go to her room, and accidentally bumped into Guiju and was caught by him. But before she could calm down, her expression changed again because the mirror did not reflect Guiju's image. She quickly left his arms, screamed loudly, and ran downstairs. Back in the past, after accidentally giving flowers to Dahae, Guiju suddenly returned to the present. The flower cart had gone quite a distance. He remembered the time he held Dahae's hand in the past, but it wasn't because he had feelings for her, but because he was moved that this time he had saved someone with his ability. Guiju told Mr. Soongu. The two were surprised that Guiju's ability had developed. Mr. Soongu then led him to the Bok family's study. There were many books that had been kept for many generations. Mr. Soongu said that in the past, ancestors had also revealed their powers. For example, there was someone who had the ability to breathe fire, but only when they went to war. before, when an ancestor held his friend's hand in a dangerous situation, his power was revealed. Or a girl who had the ability to transform into another person against her will when standing in front of the person she loved. Gradually, she forgot how to return to her original form. Even if that girl transformed into many other girls, she still couldn't have the love of the person she loved, because he already had someone he liked. He drew that person, and surprisingly, it was the original appearance of the girl who could transform. After knowing the truth, the girl had both love and her original form. So Mr. Sungu concluded that Dahe was the key to Guiju's power, but Guiju wanted him to keep this a secret, and the two of them continued to monitor. Then Guiju went into the house and saw Dahe running to the second floor in fear. She muttered that there was a ghost. He curiously walked in the door and saw Dahe walking down to the first floor in fear. Dahe had just met Guiju on the second floor, and now she met him on the first floor, making her speechless. Because she was so scared, plus she had taken sleeping pills earlier, Dahe fainted right there. Just then, Mrs. Manhoom and her husband also came in. The whole family was surprised and didn't understand what Dahe saw. Dong-hee stepped forward and said that because she had flown a little, Dahe might have seen it and was scared. Dong-hee did not forget to question why Dahe entered the secret room of her house. Mrs. Manhoom guessed that Dahe was just passing by. The whole family took Dahe to her room and were extremely worried because she did not wake up, but Dong-hee came and said that Dahe was just sleeping. The reason was that Dahe put medicine in Mrs. Manhoom's tea, and she drank the tea, but Mrs. Manhoom did not believe it and thought that Dong-hee was lying in order to take over the 50 billion building. That night, Mrs. Manhoom slept and dreamed that Dahe was taken to the hospital from a public bath. She woke up and guessed that it was a bad dream. The next morning, Dahe woke up and remembered everything that happened yesterday. She was extremely panicked and wondered what she saw yesterday. Then Dahe changed her clothes and sneaked out of the room. Suddenly Dong-hee stepped forward, scaring Dahe and causing her to back away. Dahe still clearly remembered how Dong-hee flew to the hallway yesterday. Suddenly Dong-hee told Dahe to take a closer look at her toenails. Dahe was afraid that Dong-hee would fly away again, but when she looked down, she saw nothing but her newly done nails. It turned out that Dong-hee was talking about her toenails, and they both burst out laughing. Then Dahe went downstairs to cook breakfast, fried eggs, for Inay. Suddenly, Mrs. Manhoom came downstairs and told Dahe about her dream, about seeing Dahe being taken out on a stretcher from the sauna. Hearing that, Dahe was extremely scared because that was her house. She accidentally ruined the fried eggs. Seeing that, Inay also stopped eating breakfast. Dahe chased after her and gave Inay a banana. Inay continued to tell Dahe to escape from this place immediately. Hearing that, Dahe immediately packed her things and sneaked out of the house. Guiju saw all of this. He followed her to the sauna and entered it. Dahe entered the house and told her mother that the Guiju family had supernatural powers. She convinced her mother to let this scam go, but Mrs. Lee Hong thought the Guiju family was paranoid. Her mother forced Dahe to quickly register her marriage with Guiju and then register as guardian. Mrs. Lee Hong did not forget to remind Dahe of the debt her owed. It turned out that she was not Mrs. Lee Hong's biological daughter. Many years ago, Dahe's father died from drinking. During the funeral, Mrs. Lee Hong and her husband came and demanded the money Dahe's father owed her. She forced Dahe to sign an insurance policy that if Dahe died, she would get the money. Currently, Mrs. Lee Hong is Dahe's adoptive mother. Back in the present, Mrs. Lee Hong forced her to carry out the scam plan that the family had originally set out. When Guiju went into the sauna, he was seen by Dahe's uncle, Young Tae. Hun Tae tried to call Dahe to inform her, but her phone was in the cabinet. Hun Tae watched Guiju while making rice rolls. Guiju was looking for Dahe. After failing to call Dahe, Hun Tae called Mrs. Lee Hong, but she didn't have her phone with her either. Dahe and Mrs. Lee Hong were talking when Guiju found them. He was very surprised because Dahe called Mrs. Lee Hong mom. He remembered that Dahe had said that she had no family. Mrs. Lee Hong stood up and signaled to Hun Tae outside. He understood and turned on the fire alarm. Dahe was very scared when she heard the fire alarm. She sat on the ground and couldn't move. Guiju saw that and carried her outside. Suddenly, both of them fell down because the floor was slippery. Mrs. Lee Hong told Hun Tae to call an ambulance to take Dahe to the hospital. In the hospital, she told Guiju about Dahe's story. It turned out that she was her adoptive mother. A few years ago, Dahe's high school had a fire. She adopted Dahe because she had no relatives. Since Lee Hong was not Dahe's official relative, so Lee Hong wanted Guiju to sign a document confirming Guiju as her guardian. Suddenly, Man Hong called. Guiju answered the phone and confirmed that Dahe was in the hospital. At that moment, Lee Hong approached her bedside and told her to wake up. It turned out that Dahe had pretended to faint. She worriedly told Lee Hong that Guiju's family really had superpowers. But Lee Hong didn't care and told Dahe to bring the marriage certificate back. Guiju reported Dahe's condition to Man Hong. He then returned and saw that Dahe had woken up. Dahe said that my mother had gone home because she had to watch the sauna. Guiju paid the hospital bill and took Dahe home. In the car, he admitted to her about his superpowers. The whole thing where he appeared before her and disappeared was Guiju of the future. It wasn't that he forgot. It was just that things in the past, even though they happened to her, didn't happen to him. That's all. At the same time, in the past, he could only touch her. When they returned home, Mrs. Man Hong learned that her son had told Dahe about the family's ability. She worriedly scolded her son for fear that Dahae would be scared and run away. In the past, when his ex-wife had just died, Guiju had tried to go back to the moment when he was with his ex-wife to save her, but his mother stopped him and said that he couldn't change that because she had dreamed of her father's death before. She tried everything to stop it but couldn't because that future was something that was bound to happen. She scolded her son not to try to change the future. In the past, the ancestors of the Bok family were burned to death for saving others. She advised Guiju to look at reality. Back in the present, Guiju believes that he can save Dahae, so he reveals his ability to her. When Dahae returns to her room, she writes down Guiju's family and the abilities they once possessed. At the dance club, Inae sits quietly in a corner. She listens to the music and watches her friends practice. Suddenly, Inae's boyfriend appears and snatches her headphones and compliments the song she is listening to. From afar, Hiram sees Inae and boyfriend. Her smile disappears, replaced by an expression of dissatisfaction. After club activities, the group goes out to eat tteokbokki. Inae quietly walks in the opposite direction. She enters a convenience store to buy super spicy noodles. Hiram also follows Inae and eats noodles with her. While the two of them are eating together, Hiram asks Inae how she feels about her boyfriend. At that moment, Inae's glasses are taken off by Hiram. Inae immediately reads Hiram's thoughts. It turns out that Hiram also likes Inae's boyfriend. Hiram doesn't want Inae to have feelings for her current boyfriend. Inae has to lie that her boyfriend is extremely annoying. Inae's lie is accidentally heard by her boyfriend. Inae regrets what she said. She thinks that she shouldn't read other people's minds. Hiram looks at Inae and smiles smugly. Although Dong-hee is very determined to lose weight during the day, at night she brings a lot of food to her room. Suddenly she sees her mother sneaking around in front of Dahae's room. Mrs. Manhome is extremely worried and afraid that Dahae will leave because their family's secret has been revealed. Dong-hee knocks on the door to ask, but Dahae comes out and tells her need to be quiet. Then she goes into the room, remembering Guiju's words. Dahae thinks of a way and prints out the marriage certificate. Guiju remembers Dahae's accident in the sauna. He goes back to the past with the hope of saving her from the accident. When he saw Dahae, he followed and accidentally walked into the women's changing room. Because he was too panicked, he returned to the present. Feeling shocked by the scene, Guiju went to the bathroom to flush the toilet to help himself regain consciousness. Then he continued to return to the past. But Guiju returned to the moment when Dahae panicked and stepped out of the secret room. When she stepped up and almost fell, luckily Guiju caught her in time. Then Dahae thought he was a ghost. She pushed him away and ran downstairs. Guiju understood why Dahae was so scared that day. Guiju returned to the present. He came out of the bathroom and Dahae also came. She gave him the marriage certificate and said that Guiju of the future gave her this and said that the two of them needed to register their marriage as soon as possible. Realizing that Guiju was suspicious, Dahae immediately told him about her past. On the day the high school burned down, someone came to save her. That person was Guiju. That's why she wanted to marry him. However, Guiju replied that it was the wrong order. If they really had feelings for each other, they would get married. Then he went up and kissed Dahae. The two kissed passionately. Suddenly Dahae stopped because she felt someone watching her behind the door. Then she returned to her room. Suddenly she saw something outside the window. When she opened the curtains, she discovered Dong-hee flying outside. Dahae immediately backed away because she was so scared. She remembered that this whole family had superpowers. She started to lose confidence when facing them. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Mrs. Manhome came over and said that she was having trouble sleeping right now. She wanted to ask Dahae for help. The two of them went down to the kitchen. Mrs. Manhome told a story while Dahae made tea. She said that in her recent dream, she only dreamed of Dahae. That made Dahae startled and scared. Then she walked over and held Dahae's hand and excitedly said that she dreamed of Dahae holding her family's heirloom ring in her hand. This made Dahae tremble with fear. Mrs. Manhome did not know that Dahae was hiding sleeping pills in her hand. Just a little more, and everything would be exposed. Guiju did not believe what Dahae said. He wondered if what she said was true. Then he went to sleep on the couch, but every time he closed his eyes, he would go back to the past when the two of them kissed, causing him to wake up in panic. After that, he tried everything, but every time he lay down, he would go back to that moment, making him extremely angry. The next morning, Guiju saw Dahae vacuuming the house. He saw her slowly walking into the family's secret room. Actually, she was planning to search for his family's safe to steal the family's precious ring. Suddenly, Guiju called out, startling Dahae. He called her out and said that he didn't like their love developing so quickly. He also said that the future she told him might be fake, and he asked her to tell him about how he saved her at school 13 years ago. Dahae avoided telling that story and said that anyway, the two of them kissed and would get married soon, so it was no problem. Guiju said that he did it just to test if he had feelings for her, and he concluded that he didn't have feelings for her. Guiju was slapped by Dahae as soon as she finished speaking. She then angrily turned and left. In the secret room in the house, Mrs. Manhome was shocked to find that her precious watch had disappeared. She hurriedly asked Dong-hee, but she firmly denied it. However, Mrs. Manhome noticed something unusual in Dong-hee's actions, so she rushed over to check. It turned out that Dong-hee was just hiding snacks. The mother and daughter turned their suspicions to Dahae. They sneaked into Guiju's room and caught Dahae trying to hide something behind her back. Dong-hee aggressively went to check. Guiju and Mr. Sungu also curiously ran into the room to see what was going on. When Dong-hee snatched what Dahae was holding from her hand, the whole family was surprised to see that it was a marriage certificate. Guiju's parents were extremely happy and told him to quickly go to the district office to register their marriage. Dong-hee was extremely shocked and couldn't believe this fact. Guiju calmly explained that a small ceremony needed to be held before they officially became a family. At this point, Dahae was forced to reveal her secret. She was an adopted child, adopted by the owner of a sauna. Hearing this, Mrs. Manhome had a bad feeling and asked her husband to investigate the background of Dahae's adoptive mother. At Ine's school, the girl gave Hai-rim her grandma's watch. It turned out that Ine was the culprit who stole the watch. Hai-rim happily accepted the watch and hugged Ine tightly. When it was time to leave, Hai-rim saw Ine's shoes and asked to try them on. Ine accidentally read her mind and knew that she liked the shoes. Ine immediately lent Hai-rim the shoes. Hai-rim held Ine's hand and said that they were really good friends. That made Ine extremely happy. It had been a long time since she had a close friend like Hai-rim. In front of the sauna, Mr. Sungu was there watching and called the detective to investigate Mrs. Lee Hong's house. Unfortunately, Gin-tae discovered his actions. After arriving at the detective's place, the detective recognized Miss Lee Hong and informed he that she had a history of fraud. She was a loan shark and had never had a debtor who did not pay her. Mr. Sungu was very surprised by this information. He immediately called his wife, but when Mrs. Manhum answered the phone, Mrs. Lee Hong was also at the Bok family's house talking. Mrs. Lee Hong said that Dahae had to quit her job at the massage parlor and come here to live without pay as a maid. That was not what she wanted for her daughter, who had been married twice. Mrs. Lee Hong wanted Mrs. Manhum to quickly give Dahae a status in the Bok family. When Mrs. Manhum asked about her glorious past, Mrs. Lee Hong admitted that she used to be a scammer, but she didn't do it anymore. She took on the job of scrubbing customers' backs to make up for what she had done. After escorting Mrs. Lee Hong out the door, Dahae asked why she came so suddenly. She said that this family was looking for information about them, so she had to come to stop them in advance. It was also to speed up the marriage process for Dahae. When In-A returned home, Dae realized that she was wearing a different pair of shoes than the one she had this morning. Dae realized that In-A might be being bullied. Dae remembered her school days when she was bullied by her friends who poured milk on her shoes. That day, she had to go home barefoot, so Dae really wanted to help In-A. Dae went upstairs to ask In-A about school. In In-A's room, Hai-rem had just invited her to the group chat. The group went to the park on the weekend. In-A had a happy smile on her face. Suddenly, Dae walked over and continued to ask her about school. In-A accidentally looked into Dae's eyes. Dae thought she was being bullied, so In-A quickly said that she wasn't being bullied. This made Dae suspect that she could read other people's minds. Dae tried to think that there was a very big spider behind In-A, but at that time, In-A was wearing glasses, so she only found Dae's actions a bit strange. On the other side, Grace was being bothered by a student in the gym. She contemptuously refused him and was immediately beaten by him. Luckily, Dong-hee came to Grace's rescue in time. To thank Dong-hee, Grace invited her to eat barbecue. Dong-hee said she didn't eat, but she still went. She even ate a lot. The two confided in each other. Dong-hee said that everyone judges others by their appearance. For example, the girl who lives with her was the one who stole the watch, but Dong-hee's mother suspected her. Obviously, the girl living with her was Dahae. Hearing that, Grace accidentally said that there was no need to steal that cheap watch because when they got married, they would take over the 50 billion won house. Dong-hee asked Grace how she knew the value of that house with a suspicious look. Grace lied and said that everyone knew the market price of that house, but this statement didn't fool Dong-hee. After Dong-hee returned home, Mrs. Mon-home called Dong-hee and her husband into the kitchen and announced the important news that Dahae's adoptive mother had a criminal record. Because of that, she thought about it all afternoon. Mr. Sungu wanted to help Dahae, so he said that she had nothing to do with her adoptive mother. But Dong-hee thought differently. She had more reason to confirm that Dahae was a fraud and told her mother to quickly kick Dahae out of the house. Mrs. Mon-home wondered what the dream the day before of Dahae wearing her family heirloom ring meant. Dong-hee said that it was possible that Dahae stole their family ring and said that the dream was a warning to her. At the same time, Guiju and Dahae were in the living room. Guiju continued to ask Dahae how he saved her 13 years ago. He still didn't believe what she said. He himself always wanted to use his ability to save people, and he kept returning to that moment for a long time without saving anyone, so her answer was very important. Seeing her avoiding the question, Guiju went back to the past when she slapped him that afternoon. At that time, she also avoided his question. After the two went in different directions, he noticed that her shoelaces were untied. Looking at her pained expression, Guiju guessed that she probably didn't want to mention what happened 13 years ago because it brought up unpleasant memories. Guiju realized that he was wrong to keep asking Dahae. He walked over to her and helped her tie her shoelaces. He then returned to the present and apologized to Dahae for making her remember the terrible things. The next day, Mr. Sungu came to Guiju Guiju's room to convince him to open up to Dahae. Guiju was afraid that he would mess up again this time, but Mr. Sungu said that he would definitely mess up, but he could go back in time and fix it, because Dahae was very special. Before Mr. Sungu could finish speaking, Guiju returned to the past when the two kissed. He wondered if he should love again. Then he went out and saw Ine go into the secret room to steal a watch. It turned out that she was the culprit. Guiju muttered that if Ine liked it, he could buy it for her. Why would he do that? Hearing his daughter whisper that you would like it, he guessed that she was being bullied at school. Guiju immediately went to school to find the homeroom teacher to talk. At the same time, Dahae also went to Ine's school to bring her shoes. But when Dahae asked the students at school about Ine, Dahae realized that very few students knew her. Some female students even thought that Ine was Hiram's servant. A while later, Dahae met Ine walking with Hiram from the schoolyard. Dahae realized that Hiram was wearing the watch that Ine stole and Ine's shoes. Dahae asked Ine to go somewhere else to talk. Dahae said that Ine's strange behavior lately was because of her friend Hiram, right? Dahae said that if Ine didn't tell the truth, Dahae would report this to Ine's family. Ine threatened that if Dahae did that, Ine would denounce Dahae as a scammer to everyone. Dahae was surprised by that statement. Ine said that I kept this a secret because I wanted my grandmother to suffer some consequences for her habit of relying on her superpowers. Moreover, this was the first time Ine had seen a scammer in real life, so she found it interesting. Then, to increase the persuasiveness, Ine took off glasses and looked straight into Dahae's eyes and said that her two previous marriages were also scams. The first time was to take revenge on Dahae's mother, who abandoned her children to follow another man. The second time was to take revenge on her alcoholic father. But the third time, Dahae did not continue like that because she was controlled by her emotions. Dahae went from surprise to panic. Ine saw all of Dahae's thoughts. Dahae also knew that Ine had hidden her ability all along. Dahae tremblingly called Huntae and said that everything had been exposed. This family of superpowers was real, and they absolutely could not deceive this family. When Dahae was convincing Huntae to believe her, she suddenly saw Guiju at school. Dahae panicked and ran in another direction. She accidentally ran into the school gym's warehouse. Very quickly, someone locked the warehouse because they thought there was no one inside, so she was locked inside. Dahae called Huntae to ask her uncle to pick her up. Suddenly, the phone ran out of battery. Dahae used all her strength to call for help and find a way out, but failed. She also fell to the floor when trying to climb up the window. This scene was exactly like 13 years ago, when she was also locked in the school warehouse by her friends. They said that if at least one person in the school noticed Dahae missing, they would release her. But that day, no one noticed Dahae's absence in class, not even the teacher. Suddenly, a fire broke out in the school, and everyone ran out in panic. Dahae was locked inside. Hearing the noise and smoke, she was scared and called for help and tried to find a way out. In the end, she fell down and intended to give up. Back in the present, Guiju opened the gym's warehouse door and saved her. Dahae cried and recounted her accident 13 years ago. At that time, she was locked in the 5th floor warehouse when the incident happened. Guiju recalled the moment he returned to the past. A group of female students begged their senior to run into the 5th floor warehouse to save someone, and it turned out that person was Dahae. Guiju seemed to realize something. He affirmed that he would save her. Hearing that, Dahae immediately recalled the past. Although she couldn't remember the face of the person who saved her, she knew that the man had a wound on his neck. But now Guiju didn't have that wound. She thought that Guiju wasn't the one who saved her. After helping Dahae out of there, Guiju received a phone call from Ine's homeroom teacher. Dahae took the opportunity to rush home and told Hyuntae the truth about Guiju's family with superpowers. Of course, he didn't believe her. He even thought that she had feelings for Guiju, so she made an excuse not to participate in this scam. While the two were talking, Mrs. Lee Hong walked in and asked about the progress. Dahae said that after Mrs. Lee Hong appeared in their family, their attitude towards her had completely changed. Dahae suggested that they should have a plan to withdraw from that family. Guiju met the teacher to ask why Ine took the watch. The teacher explained that the watch was a birthday gift from Ine to Hiram. The two girls were close friends. Moreover, Hiram treated Ine very well. Hiram even invited Ine to join the dance club. That information made Guiju feel extremely surprised. He realized that he didn't know anything about girls before. After that, Ine was taken home by Guiju. In the car, Guiju kept asking about what happened at school, but Ine didn't care to answer because she was busy replying to messages with Hiram. Hiram texted Ine, asking if she thought she was bullying Ine, because the homeroom teacher called Ine in and asked. Ine quickly apologized to Hiram and affirmed that she always considered Hiram a close friend. Guiju tried to talk to his daughter, but Ine was angry at him for going to her school and talking to the homeroom teacher. Dahae suggested that she wanted to talk to Guiju, so Guiju went home to look for Dahae, couldn't find her at home. So he went to the sauna and asked for her whereabouts. Huntae showed Guiju where Dahae was. Thanks to that, he successfully found her. Guiju then asked Dahae to find out why Ina stole Mrs. Manhome's watch. Dahae refused to help him and suggested that they should not see each other again. She gave the excuse that she was scared when she saw the superpowered family showing off their powers, so she left. Dahae also insisted that he wasn't the one who saved her. She also asked him to move her belongings back home, but Guiju still believed that he was the one who saved her. So after that, he worked out hard, quit drinking, and cooked breakfast for Ine. The family was surprised by his change. Guiju then secretly followed Dahae to the sauna. Because of Guiju's persistence, Dahae agreed to meet Ine at his request. The two met at a coffee shop. As soon as they met, Ine asked Dahae, "If you had told my father about me stealing Mrs. Manhome's watch." Seeing Dahae staying silent and not answering, Ine asked. Dahae said that she thought Ine could read minds, so she didn't say anything. Ine said that she needed to look into the other person's eyes to read minds. Seeing Dahae deny telling her father about the watch, Ine took off her glasses and looked straight into Dahae's eyes to check. After confirming that Dahae had not told her father about the watch, Ine was relieved. Ine asked Dahae to come back to her house and promised not to reveal that Dahae was a scammer to anyone. Regarding High Rim, Ine said that she did it voluntarily and hoped that the family wouldn't worry. Dahae met Guiju again outside the car and told him not to worry because Ine had been lonely for a long time. And this is the first time she has a friend, so she wants to indulge her friend a little. However, Guiju still has to keep an eye on Ine because Ine might steal other things, so instead of saving her, he should save his daughter first. Guiju admits that he doesn't know how to be a good father. He promises to save Dahae and Ine. In the following days, Guiju still actively wakes up early to exercise in the morning. Mr. Sunwoo is very happy because his son's depression has improved. He comes to tell Mrs. Manham the good news, but now she is extremely depressed because her insomnia has become serious again. The reason is that since the day she found out that Dahae's adoptive mother is a scammer, plus Dong-hee's confirmation that Dahae is a scammer, she's been sleepless for the past few days. Mrs. Manhome came up with an idea. She told Dong-hee to go find out about that sauna. Dong-hee obeyed her mother. She pretended to be a customer and followed Mrs. Lee Hong. Suddenly, Dong-hee saw Grace appear and talk intimately with Mrs. Lee Hong. Dong-hee was surprised that they were mother and daughter. Seeing this, Dong-hee was about to go up and expose it but was stopped by Mrs. Lee Hong and offered to scrub her back. Meanwhile, Grace quickly ran away. When she got home, Dong-hee told her family what she saw and she concluded that they were part of a group of scammers. Dong-hee also saw Grace enter the hotel with her boyfriend. They must have done that to plot to marry Guiju, get the 50 billion building. This time, Mrs. Manhome began to suspect, but Guiju affirmed that Dahae could be his future wife. After saying that, he returned to the past under everyone's surprised eyes.